What started as a routine promotional appearance turned into television chaos when Bill Gates stormed off The Late Show after Stephen Colbert launched a relentless attack on his pandemic response efforts, leaving audiences stunned. The Late Show, with Stephen Colbert's studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as Bill Gates settled into the guest chair, adjusting his familiar sweater and offering his characteristic reserved smile to the audience. The Microsoft co-founder had appeared on the show multiple times before, always maintaining his composed demeanor while discussing everything from climate change to global health initiatives. Tonight was supposed to be different, a straightforward conversation about his latest book and philanthropic work. The audience applauded warmly as Colbert introduced his guest, but something felt off from the very beginning. Colbert's opening questions seemed sharper than usual, his trademark wit carrying an edge that hadn't been there in previous interviews. "So, Bill, you've written another book about saving the world," Colbert began, his voice dripping with barely concealed sarcasm. "Tell us, how does it feel to be humanity's self-appointed savior?" The audience laughed nervously, sensing the tension that was already building between host and guest. Gates, clearly taken aback by the hostile tone, attempted to redirect the conversation toward his actual work. "Well, Stephen, I think the book really focuses on practical solutions we can implement together as a global community," he replied diplomatically, but Colbert wasn't having any of it. "Together? That's interesting because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been making a lot of decisions for the rest of us without asking," Colbert shot back, leaning forward aggressively. The studio audience fell silent, realizing this wasn't the usual comedic banter they were accustomed to seeing. The conversation quickly spiraled as Colbert began attacking Gates's role in pandemic preparedness and vaccine distribution. "You spent years warning about pandemics. Then when one actually hit, your foundation's response seemed more concerned with protecting pharmaceutical profits than saving lives," Colbert accused, his voice rising. "Care to explain that to the families who couldn't afford treatments?" Gates shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usual calm beginning to crack. "Stephen, I think you're mischaracterizing our work. The Gates Foundation has donated billions toward vaccine equity and global health initiatives. We've saved millions of lives through our partnerships with organizations worldwide." But Colbert pressed on relentlessly, pulling out printed articles and waving them in the air. "Saved lives or created dependencies? Because it seems like everywhere your foundation goes, local health systems somehow become reliant on your continued funding. That's not charity, Bill. That's control." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Audience members exchanged glances, unsure whether they were witnessing an interview or an interrogation. Gates' composure was visibly deteriorating as Colbert continued his assault, questioning everything from the foundation's tax structures to its influence on World Health Organization policies. "You know what I find fascinating, Bill?" Colbert continued, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "You've managed to convince the world that a college dropout who got lucky with computer software somehow became qualified to redesign global healthcare. The arrogance is breathtaking," Gates finally snapped back, his voice sharp with frustration. "Stephen, I didn't come here to be ambushed. If you want to have a serious conversation about global health challenges, I'm happy to engage. But this personal attack approach isn't productive for anyone." The host's response was swift and brutal. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I hurt the feelings of the man who thinks he knows better than actual doctors and scientists? The same man whose foundation has been criticized by medical professionals worldwide for bypassing local expertise?" As the confrontation escalated, something unprecedented began to happen. Gates removed his microphone and placed it deliberately on the desk, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent studio. "I think we're done here, Stephen," he said quietly. But Colbert wasn't finished. "Oh no, you don't get to walk away from this," Colbert declared, standing up from behind his desk. "You don't get to play victim after years of playing God with people's lives." The audience gasped as the host abandoned his position, moving closer to Gates, who remained seated but visibly shaken. "Sit back down, Stephen," Gates warned, his voice carrying a steel that few had ever heard from the normally soft-spoken billionaire. "You're embarrassing yourself and your network," Colbert laughed bitterly. "I'm embarrassing myself? That's rich." Coming from someone who thinks buying his way into global health policy makes him qualified to make life-and-death decisions for entire continents. He gestured wildly at the audience. "Do you people realize what this man has done? He's turned humanitarian aid into a business model." The studio crew exchanged worried glances as security personnel began moving closer to the stage. This was far beyond anything they'd ever witnessed on the show. Gates stood up slowly, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "You want to talk about business models, Stephen? Let's talk about yours," Gates fired back, his composure finally cracking completely. "A comedian who's made millions mocking politicians and celebrities, suddenly playing investigative journalist. At least my work has measurable impact on real problems." "Measurable impact?" Colbert's voice reached a fever pitch. "Your measurable impact includes suppressing generic drug manufacturing in developing countries while your foundation invested in pharmaceutical companies. That's not philanthropy. That's a racket with good PR." The audience was now completely silent, stunned by the raw hostility unfolding before them. Some began pulling out phones to record, sensing they were witnessing television history in the making. Gates moved towards the edge of the stage, clearly preparing to leave, but Colbert pursued him relentlessly. "And let's not forget your cozy relationships with Jeffrey Epstein, even after his conviction. Real moral authority there, Bill." That comment hit like a lightning bolt. Gates spun around, his face dark with rage. "How dare you?" he hissed. "How dare you bring up something completely unrelated to attack my character? You've crossed every line of decency tonight." "Unrelated?" Colbert shot back. "Your judgment calls are absolutely related when you're making decisions that affect millions of people worldwide. The public has a right to question the character of someone with that much influence." The confrontation had devolved into something ugly and personal. Gates' hands were shaking with anger as he pointed at Colbert. "You're a disgrace to journalism and comedy both. This isn't an interview. It's a public lynching disguised as entertainment. Truth hurts, doesn't it, Bill?" Colbert taunted, following Gates as he moved toward the stage exit. "All those years of carefully managed public appearances, and now people get to see what happens when someone actually challenges your narrative." Gates stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Stephen? You had a platform to discuss actual solutions to global problems, and instead you chose to turn it into a circus for ratings." The billionaire's words hung in the air as he disappeared behind the curtain, leaving Colbert standing alone on stage, breathing heavily and clearly realizing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, phones recording every moment of the unprecedented meltdown they had just witnessed. For several long seconds, Colbert stood frozen, his usual quick wit completely abandoned. The cameras continued rolling, capturing his face as the reality of his actions began to sink in. He had crossed lines that no professional host should ever cross, turning what should have been a standard interview into a personal vendetta played out on national television. "Well," Colbert finally managed, his voice shaky and uncertain, "I guess we'll be right back after these messages." The show cut to commercial break, but the damage was already done. Backstage, Gates was already being escorted out of the building by security, his face grim as he declined to speak to the stunned production staff. Within minutes of the broadcast, social media exploded with clips of the confrontation. Colbert-Gates drama began trending worldwide as viewers shared their shock and outrage at what they had witnessed. The overwhelming sentiment was clear. Colbert had gone too far. Comments flooded in condemning his unprofessional behavior and expressing Sympathy for Gates, who despite his wealth and influence, had been subjected to what many viewed as a brutal public humiliation. When the show returned from commercial break, Colbert attempted to continue with his monologue, but his heart, clearly, wasn't in it. His jokes fell flat, met with uncomfortable silence from an audience that had just witnessed their host's credibility evaporate in real time. The remaining segments felt hollow and forced, with Colbert struggling to regain the comedic timing that had made him a late-night television staple. The aftermath was swift and devastating. Major news outlets picked up the story within hours, with media critics unanimous in their condemnation of Colbert's conduct. Late-night television hits new low, read one headline, while another declared Colbert's career-ending meltdown. The video clips went viral, reaching millions of viewers who watched in disbelief as one of television's most respected hosts destroyed his own reputation. In real time, network executives held emergency meetings throughout the night, fielding calls from sponsors threatening to pull their advertising. The show's ratings, which had been steadily declining in recent months, plummeted to historic lows in the following weeks. Viewers who had once tuned in for Colbert's clever political commentary now saw him as an unprofessional bully who had betrayed the trust of his audience. Gates, meanwhile, maintained his dignity throughout the ordeal. In a brief statement released the following day, he simply said, "I believe in the power of constructive dialogue to address global challenges. Last night's experience reminded me why respectful discourse is so important." His measured response only served to highlight Colbert's unprofessional behavior by contrast. The incident sparked broader conversations about the responsibility of media personalities and the ethics of entertainment journalism. Industry veterans spoke out about the importance of maintaining professional standards, with many noting that Colbert's attack had crossed the line from legitimate questioning into personal destruction. Within a month, Colbert's show faced its lowest ratings in years, with several major advertisers permanently withdrawing their support. The once celebrated host found himself increasingly isolated, his reputation as a thoughtful comedian and interviewer permanently tarnished by one night of uncontrolled aggression. The confrontation became a cautionary tale within the entertainment industry about the importance of maintaining professionalism and respect, even when dealing with controversial figures. It demonstrated that audiences still valued dignity and fairness in their media, and that crossing certain boundaries could have career-ending consequences. In the end, what was meant to be a routine promotional appearance became a defining moment that highlighted the fundamental importance of respect and professionalism in public discourse, leaving Stephen Colbert's career forever changed by his own actions.